Kenny, you're in Bree's cohort, right? Any news on Bree?
I actually just texted her.
Okay.
I haven't heard back.
Okay. She in the hospital? Okay. For what?
She just has medical conditions.
Okay. So just her conditions flaring up. Okay. All right. What's that?
2 weeks from when she was gone.
Say it again.
She'll probably be back in like 2 weeks from when she.
Okay. All right. You need to be so aware of all the things your fellow students are carrying around with them all the time. Really difficult challenges many of you have. So please be in prayer. Be conscious of all the difficulties and burdens that people all around you are carrying all the time. I know you have your own, but you actually are able to find a kind of comfort in knowing that you just share a cosmic condition with your difficulties in your life. You're never alone in them. And so be prayerful, be compassionate, be patient with one another. And always assume there's a whole boatload of stuff going on in people's lives that you don't even know about. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for these few minutes we get to be together this afternoon. Father, as you know, we are planning to talk about weighty, vital, central truths of our faith. And so, would you please help us to be attentive and tender and open and yielded and humble and eager as we seek to hear from you from your word about central and transformative truths. So, help us now, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. We concluded last time by talking about the fact that we are created persons and the tension that comes with that. Created means we're dependent. Persons means we have relative self-determination. We are individuals. We are unique. We are personal like God is personal. So there's a tension there that we've got to get right if we're going to get most things in life right in the way we relate to people. Any questions about the created person tension we concluded last time with? Where's Marcelo? Whoa, that's strange. Okay. Okay, nothing about created person tension? All right, let's keep going then. We are made in the very image of God. This is the central teaching of humanity. We are made in the very image of God. This becomes the fundamental distinctive between us and everything else in creation. The image of God in Latin is imago Dei. I don't tell you that because I ever want you to use it. I just tell you that because once people learn that, they use it. So you have to know it. If anybody can give me a good reason to speak Latin instead of English, especially in light of the fact that people don't speak Latin anymore, I'd be really happy to hear a good reason to say imago Dei instead of image of God. Can anybody think of one? Good reason for that?
Sounds sophisticated.
Sounds sophisticated, yes, exactly. That's my point. That's the only good reason that I can think of. People even say the imago. They abbreviate it. And so, yet again, one of those Latin words that is important to know but not important to use. When God describes the creation of humanity, He reiterates over and over again, obviously to make a point that we are made in His image and likeness. Genesis 1, you saw it. In our image and after our likeness, it says, let us make man. And then in His own image, in the image of God, He created him, male and female, He created them. And then Genesis 5:1 recounts the creation account and says it again, in the likeness of God. And this is the central affirmation of humanity. The doctrine of humanity is anchored in this truth of being made in the image of God. This means we're more like God than anything else He's made. We're the pinnacle of His creation. This becomes the distinctive of humanity. And the definition of being made in the image of God is that man is like God and represents Him. When you study different doctrines in the history of the church, there are some that theologians go wild over trying to figure out what it means well beyond what the Bible says. This is one of them. When you study the image of God in the history of the church, theologians work so hard to locate what the image of God is in particular in humanity. And I think that's going in the opposite direction the Bible would have us go. The Bible wants us to have a massive holistic perception of the image of God so that we're not singling out some things about ourselves and minimizing others. And in the history of the church, theologians have tried to find the image of God most clearly displayed in, well, the latest was relational ability. That when you see the image of God in humans, you see it most clearly in relational ability. Actually, for the history of the church, there's been one that theologians have focused on as the primary manifestation of the image of God. What do you think it might be? What's that? Reason, exactly. That's what theologians have said. That's where you really see it. Do you find that humorous? That theologians have located the image of God most in reason? Why is that humorous? What's humorous about that? What do theologians do for a living? They reason, right? And so I find it a bit ironic that the thing they locate the image of God most in is the thing they do best. What if we entrusted artists with defining where the image of God is most clearly seen? What do you think they might come up with? Creativity, sure. Or athletes, kinesthetic intelligence, you know. The max of your power clean. So the point is, the Bible has a very holistic approach to considering what this means. And so this is one of those definitions that you need to learn to be very satisfied with. Man is like God and represents Him, and more like God than anything else He's made. But realize when we say that we are like God, made in His image, in that definition is an inherent limitation, isn't there? So when you say something's like something else, what are you saying at the same time? It's not that thing. If it's like that thing, well, that means it's not that thing. So before we get on with the appropriate application and amplification of the doctrine of humanity, let's make sure we make the right limitations. When we say we're made in the image of God, let's start with the realization that means we're not God. This is one of those teachings that people grab onto and use biblical language to deify humanity, to turn humans into gods. I just heard Al Franken in an interview he did a couple weeks ago. Somebody asked him what he thought about Jesus saying, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I and the Father are one." He said, well, Jesus was just saying that like all human beings, God's within us, and if you've seen Him, you've seen God, just like that's true of every human being you look at. Wow, it's not what Jesus meant, clearly. And that is an example of the kind of New Age thinking that deifies each individual human. So let's recognize the limitation in this teaching before we get on to the amplification. The limitation is we're not God. We're like Him, but we're not God. Because people tuck this idea under their arm and run to human deifying extremes with it, which the New Age movement plays into and all sorts of Eastern thinking will play into. So that's why Calvin's quote is so helpful. We are not to consider that men merit of themselves, but look upon the image of God in all men, to which we owe all honor and love. You see the limiting teaching that comes with this. But there is a limitation in this teaching, but there's an amazing amplification. When we realize that human beings are the pinnacle of God's creation, and unlike anything else made in God's image, we realize that man's a reflection of God Himself and is intended to live as God's created analogy. Our main purpose for existence is to reflect God in His glory, to show something of who God is, unlike anything else. And so the image and likeness of God becomes the essence of who we are. There are two ways to define humans, and anything for that matter, according to its essence or according to its function. When we talk about defining human beings as being made in the image of God, what are we talking about? Essence or function? Essence, yes. This is the core of who we are. This is the distinguishing aspect of humanity. And so this is our essential being. Now, function flows from essence. What we are in our nature enables us to do what we do as humans. But we start with essence. We define a human by essence. We celebrate and appreciate and glory in functioning ability that flows from our essence as being made in God's image, but we ground our definition in essence. I can't emphasize this enough. We invariably anchor everything here in what we see displayed, rather than what is essentially true, regardless of a relative display of anything. We affirm the essential equality of humanity because of the essence of each human being. And that essence is being made in the image of God. We are defined by what we are, and what we do flows from that. And what we do shows what we are, displays who we are, but we ground our definition in what we are, not what we do. Yes? Is that clear? That's so important we get this right. Really want to make sure you don't miss this. So this is how we say it in a sentence. It's man as man, not some element in him or ability that constitutes the divine image. Is that clear? You are made in the image and likeness of God. That's who you are. That's what you are. Is that clear to everybody? Questions or comments at this point? You know the difference between ontological definitions and functional definitions? There he is. Hey, Marcelo. That's all right. Anything? Any questions about this? So what does this mean? What does this mean? It means that every single human being from conception to death is to be recognized as equally human, equally worthy of dignity and value and respect and protection, regardless of any functional expressions of that essence, regardless of race and gender and creed and socioeconomic status and economic ability, productivity. Anything that we see in function does not define someone in their essence. And when we think about the fall then, what does it mean to say then that human beings fell? Sometimes people think, well, in the fall we lost this image of God. This essence was lost. What would you say to that? That we were created in the image of God, but we are no longer to be defined that way because of human depravity. How would you respond to that? What do you think of that? What if someone had said to you, well, I don't think human beings are made in the image of God anymore because sin has wrecked all that? What do you think? Rebecca? Okay. Okay, good. Good. So how would you describe the relationship between sin and the image of God? What did sin do to the image? If it didn't obliterate it, if it didn't remove it, it distorted it. That's a really good word. It distorted it. It clouded it. It perverted it. It twisted it. It made it dysfunctional, but still present. Biblically, how would you defend that? What would you do to defend that biblically? I think that's a biblical idea we just affirmed. But how do you do it? Where would you go in Scripture to affirm that? Any idea? What's the basis for biblical ethics? Okay, I think that's a really good way to think, that the fact that human beings, because they're made in the image of God, fell, doesn't mean they no longer have dominion. They're no longer called to rule over and subdue and be fruitful and multiply. There's just been a relentless difficulty woven into it now. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So as God's managers, we don't now lose that role. It's just really hard now. It's really twisted now. There's a thorns and thistle, pain in childbirth, difficulty to it now. But it's still there. The identity is still there. And do you know biblical ethics are grounded in the teaching of the image of God that endures after the fall? For example, Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. What's that? What's that law? What do we call that? What do we call that? Death penalty, capital punishment. Murder brings about the greatest penalty. Now, when you hear capital punishment talked about or people try to defend it in our society, what reasons do they usually give? Why would people say, well, capital punishment's a good idea? What sorts of reasons do they usually give? Okay, that's a vengeance idea. Yeah. What else?
Deterrence of like future murder.
Yeah.
Or
Now there's very little evidence that actually works. That's actually true. But yeah, that this will deter future crime. It'll teach society a lesson about how seriously we take this. So it's a sociological reason. So there are social reasons given for it, typically legal reasons, but I want you to pay very careful attention to the reason God gives. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. Why? For in the image of God he made man. So why don't we murder? Oh, God hates the societal effects, the relational effects of murder for sure. But the core reason is what? What are you doing when you murder? What's that? Yeah, you're destroying the very image of God. That's the main reason. That's the core reason we don't murder. That's the core reason we treat people the way we do, because of what they are. Not because of how it'll mess us up or our society up, or because of what it says about what you think about that thing you just killed. And so we recognize here the Bible after the fall teaches an enduring ethic that's grounded in this enduring image of God that all human beings are made in. So you read that and you say, whoa, God takes this seriously. Sure, I'm glad I never murdered anybody. But the Bible takes it way deeper than that. Watch how deep it takes it. James 3:8. No human being can tame the tongue. Okay, so our words. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it, we bless our Lord and Father, and with it, we curse people, and here it is, who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Can you hear the righteous indignation and the incredulity in the voice of James here? From the same mouth come blessing and cursing? No! My brothers, these things ought not to be so. He's saying you should see the massive disconnect that's required to curse people with the same mouth you bless God with. He's saying you've got to make the connection between the vertical and the horizontal here. You've got to see that love for God necessarily demands love for people because they're made in the image of God. See, biblical ethics is grounded on this teaching of the image of God. We treat people the way they do because we revere God so much. And if you don't make that connection, you're missing the fundamental biblical view of the Christian life. And you've got to listen to this because we've got a major disconnect. We give ourselves permission to be hateful and think we can be loving God well at the same time. And that's not how it works. And when you see human beings, when you really see human beings made in the image of God, and then your love for God grows, it couldn't be more natural than for your love for people to grow. And when that doesn't happen, there's a major malfunction. And the fact that the church so consistently, and we as individuals so consistently, give ourselves permission to be hateful on the horizontal and still think we're doing okay vertically, We've got to make that connection. The Bible does everything it can to help us do that. When you make that connection between God, who you revere and love and honor, and human beings, and believe that they're made in the image and likeness of God, that translation takes place. So then, is it any wonder Jesus goes where he goes? In Matthew 22. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first, great and first commandment. And then listen, you'll hear this like you never have before. And the second is like it. Why is it like it? Why is the second commandment to love your neighbor as yourself like the first one? Why are they alike? What makes them alike? Yeah, the object of love shares this quality of godliness, godlikeness, that you've got to make that connection. And yes, in a fallen world, guys, there are all sorts of difficulties in making that connection because of the cloudedness of it, the perversion of it, the twistedness of it, both in ourselves and the people we seek to love. It's made really hard. It's made hard to see it. It's made hard to experience it ourselves. But we are called to be the people who have the vision to see it and to respond to it. Look where John takes it. I mean, this is as radical as it can get. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he just needs a little more time. Nope. He's a liar. Whoa, John. Whoa. Sounds judgmental to me. That sounds a little black and white. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. If you read the letter that John writes here, 1 John, watch, read, please, before, what's today? Before the weekend, would you sit down and read through 1 John? Oh, your soul will be so blessed. And you pay attention to how often John connects love for God with love for people. It's like he can't even get one sentence out where he says, God is love, without immediately saying, so love one another. He doesn't even get a breath out without making that connection for us. I mean, James is saying, this gets right down to how you use your words. It's really simple. It's not complicated. What he's saying is please don't think you can go to chapel and sing praises to God, walk out, and 4 minutes later sit in the eagle's nest and trash somebody with that same mouth. You can't do it. That's not how it works. That's what he's saying. It's as clear as it can be. And John is saying love for God and love for people goes hand in hand. To say you love God and be practicing hatred toward people in an unrepentant, unconfessed way is showing a major defect in your love for God. Make the connection, he's saying. My dear friend Dave Talley, he's a counselor. He had his own counseling practice for years in Chicago when we lived there at the same time. And he mostly counseled Christian couples, married couples, who were having marital difficulty. And Dave said, if you ask him, he'll tell you, usually this is how it would go. They'd come in for their first appointment, and Dave would say, well, tell me what's going on. And he would watch this married couple go after each other's throats, spitefully and hatefully and vindictively and competitively, tearing each other up. And he'd let that go for a while. And then he said he'd always do the same thing. He'd turn to the husband and he'd say, tell me, brother, in light of all this marital strife, how's your relationship with the Lord? And you know, Dave said the vast majority of the time, the answer was something like, oh, well, actually, it's never been better. To tell you the truth, all of this trouble with her has really drawn me closer to the Lord. We're really like this now. And Dave would open his Bible to 1 John 4:20. You need to read, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he's a liar. And then look the guy in the eye and say, you're not only mean to your wife, you're a liar too. Sometimes they didn't come back for the second meeting because he told them the truth. It's amazing that we have this way of deceiving ourselves into thinking God's even blessing our hatred toward people because we feel so justified in it. We feel so right. And God demands that we love. Now, love is not sex. Love is not a vague emotion that you generally kind of feel toward people. What is love biblically? What is it? How would you define it? Yeah. It's at its heart self-sacrificial. You're creatively, strategically, intentionally, diligently, from the heart, working for the good of others. Not just when it's convenient, not just when it might happen, but it's what you do. And what's the ultimate example of this in human history? What about Jesus? The cross, yes. Thank you, Aurora. The Bible couldn't be more clear about it. This is love, to lay down your life for your brothers. You have no greater love than that. So it's inherently self-sacrificial. But you can be self-sacrificial and not loving. Terrorists are self-sacrificial and not loving. They give the ultimate sacrifice when they blow themselves up. So it's not enough to be self-sacrificial. You can be self-sacrificial and not loving, but you can't be loving without being self-sacrificial. Love always involves self-sacrifice. But it involves self-sacrifice that is after the good of the other. That's what we're talking about here. That's what we work for, we strategize for, we think about. We work toward that. It doesn't just come naturally. I'm concerned about automatic withdrawal. You know, do you give money to good things automatically deducted from your bank account? Anybody do that? No? Maybe, yeah. So we give to a compassion kid, and I go months without thinking about that kid because it's just taken out. I don't even notice it. We give the church that way now. It's amazing. We like to give in a way where we don't even feel it. Well, love always is felt. It's to be done with joy, but it's to be done in a way where you feel it. We learn to love conveniently and comfortably and as unnoticed as possible. Well, we're talking about something very different here. All right, questions or comments? Anything at this point? So, I love that you're asking that question. I love that you're thinking about that. Because that's exactly where this teaching needs to lead us, to think about those things and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I've been rubber stamping war, especially when a Republican president says to go do it. As an American Christian, maybe I need to rethink that whole thing. Now, I'm not saying there's not an excellent argument for just war. But we need to know the argument because we got the ultimate stakes here. That's exactly, we don't have time to get in. This is in a Christian ethics class, which we need here. But I wish we asked that kind of question way more than we do. About capital punishment, too. Why that's okay in the Old Testament, and is it still okay in the New Testament, in the New Covenant? Those are the kinds of questions this needs to be leading to.
Does systematic have anything on it, or?
I don't think Grudem deals with war or the death penalty. John Frame's book on Christian ethics most certainly does, and I'd encourage you to go there. You're talking about war in particular. There's a book called 4 Views on War. Clouse is the editor. 4 different Christian perspectives on it. Working around a just war theory, pacifism, only defensive war, only preemptive war, allows for preemptive war. Different views of Christian perspectives on it. But it's alarming to me how few Christians have ever thought through this issue, and yet will support war without ever thinking, well, what makes a war just or not? And do I ever put myself in a situation where I'm not thinking through that well enough to be able to advocate what's going on? Those are exactly the kind of questions we need to be asking. And a teaching on the image of God and humanity needs to get us asking about those questions and thinking way more about them than we do. So thanks. I'm not positive, but I bet in Grudem's new book on politics, he just has a big fat book now on a biblical view of politics. I bet he's got a section in there on that. Now, again, read it critically. Read it constantly asking this question. We got the ultimate stakes here when we talk about this issue. Okay, page 52. Manifestations of the image of God, straight out of Grudem. I shouldn't even need to give this to you. When you read, that's the kind of notes you should have when you're done. Really, I want you to see that as an example. You read a lot of content on humanity in Grudem, and you might not have even realized that's how it all cashed out in those chapters, right? 5 major categories, 16 subcategories, showing us how we see the image of God. We ground our definition of humanity in essence, but we recognize that function flows from essence. And so what does this function look like? It's legitimate to say, how then are we different than everything else in creation? How do we see this essential difference show up? And there are some key ways this happens. Morally, we're accountable to God. You recognize that your dog Scruffy is not accountable to God in any moral way. You realize that he's not racked with guilt after he eats the neighbor's cat, with an inner sense of right and wrong. You realize that when he rolls over, plays dead, and shakes, it's not righteous behavior. It's obedient behavior, with no moral righteousness at all. But in humans, when we obey God's moral law, it reflects the image of God itself. So there's a moral manifestation. There's a spiritual manifestation of the image of God. We have an immaterial spirit. We have the capacity to relate to God. Have you ever thought about this? It is profoundly human to worship. It is profoundly and distinctly human to pray. So, the big difference between you and a monkey is not that you have thumbs, it's that you pray. It's that you worship. Think about that. Think about the implications for that. If you are living prayerlessly, you're living like a monkey. I'm serious. Serious. You are not expressing this wonderful manifestation of being human, being made in the image of God. You relate to God. You have immortality. You have the capacity as a human being made in God's image to live forever. Animals don't. This leads to hard conversations when my 8-year-old's hamster dies. Sorry. Really, I shed a tear when Pumpkin died. I did. Mostly because my daughter was so hurt by it. But Pumpkin died, and it's a great opportunity for a lesson in theological anthropology. Okay. Spiritual abilities, mental abilities, abstract reasoning, complex abstract language. You get used to the amazing abilities of your mind. And you're surrounded with all these great minds around here, and you forget how astounding a human mind is. The ability of a human mind to think abstractly. You are capable of thinking about abstract things like thinking. You can think about thinking. You can think about thinking, which is what you're doing right now. That's really cool. Do you realize how cool that is? Abstract reasoning ability is amazingly, wonderfully human. My friend Fred Sanders, who's a brilliant guy, he has an amazing mind. He's fascinated by palindromes. You know what a palindrome is? Same word forward and backwards. Bob, palindrome. But Bob's not enough for Fred. He likes race car. That's a palindrome. Did you know that? Same forward and backwards. Well, Fred just doesn't like words and terms. He likes sentences, and he'll make them up, and he recognizes them, and he'll be talking to people, and he almost never misses a palindrome if they say it by accident in a sentence. And it's just amazing. And he said there was one time in his life where he was intensely trying to learn to type and intensely trying to learn German, and he was strangely obsessed with palindromes during this time. So he'd find himself talking to people. And as they were talking, he found himself typing what they were saying just in his mind and hands, and then translating what they were saying into German and typing it, and then looking for palindromes in what they were saying by typing it backwards in English and then in German. The human mind's an amazing thing. He said he almost went crazy during that time of his life. There was no good reason to do it, no reason at all. But the human mind is amazing in what it is able to do. And so abstract reasoning, complex abstract language, our ability to communicate is astounding if you think about it. A sense of the distant future and afterlife. Your dog Scruffy never lays down in bed at night and says, wonder what I should do tomorrow, or next year, or after I die. Isn't it so human to do that? We are like God in this recognition and ability to think about what's to come. Sometimes, so much so, I need to teach you about not living parenthetically so you're not always living in the future. Creativity is profoundly human and profoundly godlike. Now, 1 through 10, I would call absolute manifestations of the image of God in humanity. Absolute. I don't think anything else has these in the created order. 11 through 16, I would call relative manifestations. I think animals have 11 through 16 in some way, but nothing to the depth and complexity that humans have them. Emotions, the complexity and depth of the human emotional life is astounding. Depth of interpersonal relationships and marriage and dominion all show a godlikeness. Even our bodies, I'm so thankful Grudem included this in his chapter on the image of God. Do you remember when Grudem talked about the body even being a manifestation of the image of God? Did that bother any of you? It should, I think, concern you. Yeah. Okay, good. So that doesn't mean we think by nature God is physical. God is a physical body. Actually, Mormons believe that. We believe God is spirit, but the ways we act like God are so often with our physical bodies. God talks and we use our mouths to do that, and He hears and we use our ears to do that, and He acts and we use our hands and our feet to do that. And so we are expressing God-likeness in our bodies. I love that He wouldn't let us relegate the body to something lesser in being made in the image of God than our souls. It's really important. Bodies and childbearing all do this. Now, guys, I quickly rush after going through these manifestations. These aren't the only ones, but these are some good, helpful key ones to get you realizing the distinctions between us and everything else. But again, I want to rush to the definition of the image of God as being like God and representing Him. Representation flows from being like God, and I want to rush and affirm that again so you realize that the definition is not the manifestations. The manifestations are the manifestations of the definition, right? What we do is quickly define by function, define by the manifestations, rather than the essence. And guys, the manifestations come and go. The manifestations are relatively expressed. The essence is always the same. And so we appreciate, we celebrate, we love functioning ability that essence allows, but we ground the definition in essence. Do you get this? I keep saying this because we constantly go here to define things, including humans. And I want to make sure we ground it here and learn to see this no matter what's going on here. Yes? Okay. Questions about anything at this point? Comments? And it's not even just physical or mental disabilities, it's even the job you have. Do you know how hard it is for us to truly value the people who give you your food in the cafeteria the same as you value Barry Corey? Barry will tell you how weird it is that when he became the president, all of a sudden all his jokes got funnier. And people just treated him so much nicer. It is so hard for us to not determine worth, essence, by function. It's not even disabilities only or physical limitations, it's socioeconomic status. It's economic power and pull and importance. We have the hardest time with this. So, we need to get this right. So let's make some conclusions. 1, guys, please, 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 don't just learn these right now. Absorb them. Take them in. Do exactly what Marcelo keeps doing. He's saying, oh no, wait, I need to let this invade something in my heart, in the way I think about things. Let it do surgery on you. Listen to these things. From conception to death, all human beings are created in God's image, and therefore worthy of profound dignity and value and respect and love. 2, this is all review. The image of God in man is man as man, essence, not merely some element in him or particular manifestation of the image, functional ability. 3, this one's hard, so listen. Although humans reflect, manifest, show, display, reflect the image of God in differing degrees and ways, no one is created in the image of God in greater or lesser degree. Got it? That's huge. That gets back to this issue of essence and function. Function flows from essence. Reflection of the essence is a functional thing. And everyone in this room right now is functioning, is reflecting the image of God in differing ways and to differing degrees. Who's an artist in here? Who's artistic, creative, artistic? What do you do? Oh, nice. Paint and draw. Have you always done that?
Yeah.
It's Gene, right? Gene. Since you were a kid, you just were wired this way. Yeah, you do that. You draw stuff. What kind of stuff do you like to paint and draw?
I love to do portraits.
People.
Because I feel like it's such a challenge to be able to capture,
Yes.
Someone's face and expression. So when you can do that, it's just, and you see it, you're
Yeah,
like, wow.
man. Gene, I've always wanted to be like you. I really have. I'm an artist wannabe. Were you one of those little kids who would sit in class in elementary school and draw things?
I would make storybooks.
Yeah. Storybook. It wasn't enough just to draw. She would draw a storybook. Well, thanks for piling it on, Gene. I would draw a horse, show it to someone, and they'd think it was a car. It wasn't an issue of getting them to say, oh, that's really good. It was an issue of getting them to realize what it was. I am severely limited in my artistic, creative abilities. Jean is not. And I bet most people in this room are less limited than I am. I think I'm limited because God chose in His sovereignty to give Jean more ability to function, to reflect His image creatively, artistically. I think some of it is because of sin. I really do. I think to be an artist, you have to be patient, don't you? It requires a patience to sit and get it just right. So I think my lack of patience, which is a sin, is part of my problem. I think some of it is natural in that that's how God made us. But it's safe to say that, how old are you, Jean? In 21 years, Jean has reflected God's image more than I have in her artistic creativity in 47. So, and that's just the truth. So, is Jean more in the image of God than I am? No, in case you were wondering. No. That's the point. So what do? We celebrate that. We applaud it. We love it. We thank her. We compliment her. We appreciate what she does. We see God in it. But we never define her by it. Because it's what if she gets hurt? Can't do it anymore. There's no movement in her hands. Then what? Does she now lack that? She now lacks the ability to express that functional reflection of the image of God. But just like I'm of no less worth or dignity or value or definitionally made in the image of God than she is, so it doesn't depend on function. But we celebrate. And this is tricky. This can be tricky. It actually, when Christians get this, they can get weird. And so you say, oh, Jean, that's a beautiful painting. And she'll say, oh, it's not me, it's the Lord. I know, but just thank you. Oh, don't hurt me, it's God's, I know that, but He's using you to do this. And we can't even take a compliment anymore, forgetting that it really is God reflecting through us. So we can get strange about it and not be able to even boast in what God's doing in our lives, as long as it's God doing it that's clear to us. And so we need to ground the definition of humans in essence, celebrate and appreciate, applaud, and value the function, never reduce definition to this. And so when someone says to you, oh, that was a beautiful song that you played on your violin, you don't say, don't define me by that. I'm more than my violin. I know. So we don't define people by it, but we celebrate it. We love it, and we ground everything here. And we learn to see functional expression of the image of God in ways we typically don't. In ways our culture hasn't helped us to see the image of God. In ways our families or our churches haven't helped us to see the image of God. To not only emphasize what we're good at when we see the image of God, but learn to see it in countless other ways than we typically do. I told you that we worked in a group home. My wife and I ran a group home for developmentally disabled men. I told you that. Went on our honeymoon, came home, moved into the house with 8 guys, and they were our family for 4 years. From ages 28 to 52. They were our family. And we love these guys, and that was as important as anything we've done in our lives. And one of the hardest things we experienced was we went from running a group home to teaching, coaching, running a dorm, and going to grad school at a Christian college in the Midwest. A very competitive Christian college to get into, to stay in. You get achievers, you get performers there. And it was really hard for us to go from the group home to that Christian college. because of what functioning was valued. See, when you're at a place like where we were at the college, people care about things like what were your SAT scores and what's your GPA and do you play the violin really well and how many home runs did you hit in high school and are you skinny and are you pretty and do you have that sort of Midwestern Swedish prettiness to you and you know, my friends would visit from New England and they'd say, where are all the ugly people? I don't see any ugly people like us. What's going on here? And they'd look around and I have friends who come here and say the same thing. And what's valued in those places in a Christian environment? Functioning ability that we actually should celebrate. Like I said, violin playing and intellectual expression and ability and performance and athletic ability. Yes, we celebrate these things. We don't downplay them, but do we emphasize them at the expense of other things? Because you know what my guys in my group home cared about? None of that stuff. They didn't care if you had cool jeans or a trendy haircut. You know what my guys cared about? Will you be compassionate when I need help flossing my teeth? Will you be gentle? Will you be a man of integrity? Will you do what you say you're going to do? Will you be kind? Will you be faithful? Will you come and visit me after you leave the group home? Or will you be just one of those other people who came and left and never came back? The guys in my group home who had severely limited functioning ability in some really, really drastic ways, they cared about fruit of the Spirit kinds of things. Really Christian things. In some ways, way more than the Christian subculture we went and then became part of. Could it be that my guys, some of whom had IQs in the 60s, were reflecting the image of God more than shiny Christian college students? To a greater degree in really important ways. We just don't learn to see it very well because of the things we've been taught to value over against others. And so this point that although humans reflect the image of God in differing degrees and ways, no one is creating the image of God in greater or lesser degree is vital. It is so vital we get this. Four, although distorted after the fall, man remains created in the image of God. We've gone over all these. Number 5, the image of God is the foundation for human dignity and biblical ethics. Guys, do you realize how important this one is? Why do we treat people the way we do? Why should we hate the objectification of women, the exploitation of women? Why should we hate racism? Why should we hate pornography the way we do? Why should we hate any time anyone is degraded and devalued and oppressed? Why should we hate that? Because of what they are. And where do we get this? From here. Please believe. I've looked. I would love if you could find somewhere where you get this basis for universal human dignity and universal human rights anywhere but here. I have conversations, some with people in my own family who don't believe in God, don't believe this is the Word of God. They believe we're just molecules and atoms and animals and it's survival of the fittest. And yet they think racism's evil. And I find myself all the time more and more saying, why? Why is racism wrong? Why is the oppression of women wrong? I mean, why is it wrong that people treat people deceitfully and disrespectfully? Why is that so bad? And people in my family usually say, and friends will say, well, it just is. Everybody knows it is. No, everybody doesn't know it is. That is one of the biggest lies. You know, we grow up in this culture saturated with a biblical view of humanity that gives us a view of humans as deserving equal rights and dignity and value if they're in the 3rd trimester, or if they're not too old. We'll get to that later. But everybody who at least is born we tend to think deserves equal universal human dignity and respect. So, why? You need to start asking people why they believe that. Why is racism wrong? Especially if I can demonstrate to you that some racial groups are functioning less efficiently than others. Some racial groups are contributing to the gross domestic product in the world far less than others, and actually they're contributing disease at a much greater rate than others. So tell me why it's wrong to single out some groups of people based on certain performance abilities or lack thereof, and tell me why genocide isn't wrong on some level then. Look, we've got the reason. It's a view of humans. It's the only place, and people say to me, well, everybody knows it. Everybody knows you're not supposed to. Everybody doesn't know that. Study human history. Look around the world right now, and you'll see entire systems, governmental system, religious systems, that put people in very clear categories and relative worth along those lines. And so there are views in Hinduism, if you go to India, that women don't even rate a caste. You hear about the Dalits, the lowest caste in India, and how oppressed they are? Women don't get a caste. They don't even rate one. So even though it's outlawed a long time ago, it still happens that in villages, when a man dies, his wife has no existence, and they burn her alive on her husband's funeral pyre. It's called sati. Everybody knows that people deserve equal dignity and value and respect. No, they don't. This is a profoundly Christian way of thinking. And people in our society have absorbed this Christian view of humanity, and they don't even realize it. And they'll be criticizing Christianity, and they'll be hating things like racism and intolerance toward people, and they don't even have reasons for it. You know, the hardest job I ever had, I've had a lot of hard jobs. Tough jobs. The hardest one was teaching 7th grade social studies. Those are some confused human beings right there. But I was a permanent sub at a junior high school in Connecticut, and I had to teach life skills as part of the social studies curriculum. Anybody have life skills in your public school? What'd you learn, Sean, in life skills?
Nothing.
What were you supposed to learn?
Well, you're supposed to learn about like how to make. I don't know. It's so long ago.
Okay, so I have a feeling Sean learned what he was supposed to learn, life skills, from his family, so he didn't have to pay attention. Yeah. Life skills is be kind. Don't be a racist. Be tolerant. Be loving. Be honest. Be respectful. That kind of stuff. And at the core of the whole curriculum, you know what the cardinal doctrine was? The most important thing these kids needed to know? What do you think it was? Golden rule. Well, they even thought that do unto others would flow out of this one. What do you think it was? Yeah, self-esteem, that they have value, that they should feel good about themselves. And so I get the curriculum for life skills, teaching all these values, especially feel good about yourself, and I'm looking through the curriculum, and I can't find any reasons for any of this stuff. Don't be a racist. Yeah, I wonder why I should tell them they shouldn't be a racist. Nothing in here. Be kind, be honest. There's no reason for any of this stuff. Feel good about yourself? There's really no reason for that. And so, what do? You just throw pithy platitudes at kids? Feel good about yourself. Come on, be nice to people. Be respectful, put others first. Don't be a racist. But a Puerto Rican kid beat me up. Oh, but that doesn't matter. Why not? It matters to me. Feel good about yourself. Why? Because you should, because you're special. And kids hear that, and it doesn't mean anything. If you don't give them compelling reasons, they'll just keep cutting themselves. They'll just keep going to the bathroom after lunch and throwing up. They'll just keep hating that Puerto Rican kid. You got to give them reasons. Guys, We've got the reasons. So, wouldn't it be really tragic if the people with the reasons didn't live these things out? And wouldn't it even be more tragic then if then the people who didn't have the reasons did live these things out? And I think that happens far too much. So, it's the foundation of biblical ethics and dignity, human dignity, and it's the only one I know of. And I'm telling you, a great leader like Gandhi, he needs to go dip into the Bible to get this. He couldn't go to Hinduism to get the stuff he taught. Six, the image of God is the foundation for human purpose and meaning and accountability. Everybody wants to know their life matters and has meaning. Now, why does it? If you're not created by God in His image, in fellowship, for relationship with Him, to glorify Him, and your life has eternal consequences, implications, and significance, then why does your life have meaning? What is the source of that meaning? And to whom are you accountable? Who do you answer to? Boy, talk about an issue in our society. Do people feel accountable to anyone besides themselves? My daughter had a particularly tough day. Today's her 11th birthday. We just took her out to lunch. I'd buy her a bike because she outgrew her first one already. So Caroline had a rough day at school and at home. We were on her for a few hours after school, and she comes out of the room and she just says, I just want one day where nobody tells me what to do once. And I said, man, kid, I can relate to that. Well, let's talk. And I talked to her about the fact that there will never be 1 minute of one day of her life where she's not accountable. First and foremost, just like her father, to Jesus. We answer to God for everything. And we got to get to the point where that is not oppressive to us. That is wonderful and life-giving and meaning-giving to our lives. We answer to God for everything. And it doesn't even end there. We answer to the authority that God puts in our lives. And I said, Caroline, there's not a minute of one day where Daddy doesn't answer to a whole lot of people. First and foremost, Jesus. Second, the elders at our church. I answer to them for my marriage, for my parenting, for what kind of man and neighbor I am, for my integrity. I answer to my department chair, Dave Talley, and my dean, Dennis Dirks, and my provost, David Nystrom, and my president, Dr. Corey. And she said, well, the Coreys gave her a stuffed animal, this little dog when she got here. And it immediately became her favorite, and it's her go-to stuffed animal. It's named Fifi, she named it. So I said, and President Corey, I answered to him. She said, you answer to Mr. Fifi? And I said, yes, I do. Answer to Mr. Fifi. I do what he tells me to. Because I wanted her to know that accountability is a good thing, and it comes out of who we are. Americans hate accountability. Americans love autonomy. I don't answer to anybody but myself. And that will never be the case for us. And that's a good thing. Please don't see authority and accountability as a bad thing. We chafe against it in our fallen nature, and it's a good, wonderful thing. Okay, guys, if you don't get anything else today, get this one. Jesus shows us what the image looks like. It can be overwhelming to think about being human and fulfilling our destiny in this God-glorifying way. But when we wonder what it looks like, look at Jesus. After all, 2 Cor 4 and Colossians 1 and other passages say He is the image of the invisible God. Jesus not only shows us God, He shows us humans, as we're intended to be. He shows humanity. And so that means you need to be male and a carpenter and live in Nazareth. No, those are details. Those are functional things that aren't at the essence of being human as God intended. It doesn't mean the details. It means that in the details of your unique calling and life, these 4 things are going on. This orients everything else. Jesus shows us true humanity because everything was anchored in perfect fellowship with the Father. And guys, this is what we're after in life. This is our life. Communion with God, fellowship with God, relationship with Him, intimacy with Him. That's what we get after. We wake up in the morning, and that's our driving passion, to know God to draw closer to God, no matter what the details of our days, that's what drives us, knowing God. You're in a time in your life when there's all this future ahead of you and all this uncertainty, and you desperately want to know, what classes should I take? What should I major in? Should I date? And if I do, who should I date? And what should I major in? Because what job should I have when I'm out of here? And where do I want to live after college? And what should I do over the summer? And you're consumed with all the details. And in the midst of all the details, it's got to be fellowship with God that you're after more than anything else. I'm convinced most of us would be perfectly happy if God gave us His will for our life, whether or not He gave us Himself at the same time. God wants you to want Him more than His will for your life. And His will for your life really only comes to you when you have fellowship with God. He doesn't hand it off to you like a blueprint. He gives it to you in relationship with Him day by day as He conforms your heart to be like His and tunes your ear to hear His voice. And fellowship with God is what Jesus modeled for us more than anything else. And this naturally leads to what? Perfect obedience to the Father's will. It's not complicated. When you have fellowship with the Father, it doesn't primarily show itself in writing lofty poetry to God. It shows itself in daily devotion and faithfulness shown by daily obedience to His will, to His law. Jesus submitted to the will of the Father and displayed for us the ultimate example of daily devotion in this way. And what this culminates and looks like is selfless love for others. This obedience always ends up being this other-focused, self-sacrificial desire to strategically and intentionally meet the needs of other people. And you walk around as a there you are person all the time. And in this, you perfectly fulfill your intended purpose. And this obedience to the Father's will and this love for others then isn't a burden. It's not something we carry around. It's something that is our joy. For the joy set before Him, Jesus endured the cross. Giving and obedience leads to life and fulfillment and meaning. Lord, help us. Goodbye.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.